Okay, so welcome everyone finally to my first ever podcast. This has been forever and a day that I've been wanting to start this, and I'm so excited for my very first ever episode to have my amazing client here, Mel. So, welcome, Mel.
Thank you.
So, a little bit about Mel before I hand over. Mel used to work in corporate. And then 8 months ago now,
Yeah, 8 months ago now.
8 months ago, she started an online business in the high ticket affiliate marketing space. And pretty much as soon as she started working with me, hired me, and she's totally kicked ass. And so I wanted to introduce her today and just talk a little bit about that journey because she's, I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, it can take a while to get to, even like consistent 10K months. And you've done more than that in just 8 months, which is really awesome. So welcome, Mel.
Thank
Would
you.
you like to firstly share, just a little bit about why you became an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I actually didn't even realise I was becoming an entrepreneur when I was, which is quite interesting. But I guess the situation for me was that I'd been working in corporate for 20 years. It was a great industry. I enjoyed what I did somewhat. When I say that, like I enjoyed the people that I worked with. I enjoyed that it was a good job in terms of the way that society says good jobs are. I climbed the corporate ladder. I was making good money, ticking all the boxes, so to speak. But when I was just completely honest with myself, I was like, I'm actually just like really burnt out. And we had our second son second child, who was a little boy, Thomas. And I was just like, I just can't keep doing this anymore. And that's really what took me into the journey of being an entrepreneur and wanting to not have to go to an office all the time or have to do 40, 50-hour weeks and really not, live make another person's dream come true. I was like, well, what about creating the life, that I wanted to live, which was to be a present mum and to still have the success and not live in this world of sacrifice.
Yeah, I love that. So really in search of a better quality of life.
Yeah.
And also having experienced that pain of burnout and missing out on living a life that you actually value.
Absolutely.
So I love that. And we were talking just the other day in our session a couple of days ago about how sometimes there does need to be that pain point for people to like go have that line in the sand moment of like, fuck this.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to swear on here? All right, fuck this. I am choosing to do something different because this is not what I want. And I think those moments are really powerful, and that's when the pain is actually like a gift or a blessing. So love that.
Absolutely. And I definitely had that pain because I remember going like, I'm not going back to corporate. And at the time I was like, I don't know how I'm not doing that. I know that I'm not going to sacrifice in the process of it. But it was, as you said, that line in the sand moment. And I was like, I'm just not going back to that world, and we're going to work out how over time.
I love that because what I hear in that is like you made the decision. So when you decided, because decide means to cut off any other possibility, right? And so you cut off the option of that life of like building someone else's dream, working in corporate, and because you cut that off, you opened yourself up to receiving the vehicle, the people, everything you needed to be living the life that you're now living, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So I love that. So next question, I'd love to know, what had you decide to work with a coach, and what had you decide to work with me?
Very good question.
Other than me being amazing.
So coming into the business, I did what I had done always, which was the corporate hustle. So I was like, okay, show me universe, what else is out there? After I'd made this decision never to go back to corporate, I found a 7-figure successful woman that was living the exact life that I wanted to. She had, 3 kids under 5, had built, over $1 million business, had all this time freedom. And so I was, put it out there. And then I've just completely forgotten your question. Sorry.
So what had you decide to work with a coach?
Yes,
and
okay.
work with me.
So then I did, what I did previously around like going quite hard with like learning and wanting to be coachable and all of that. And all I kept hearing, and I couldn't unhear it in this business, was that 80% of the work is inner work and 20% is strategy. And we know that the strategy works because in the business that I do, there's just too many people doing well to question whether it does or doesn't. So I was like, okay, I've got the strategy. I've got the 7-figure mentor that's literally prepared to show me how to do it. And then there's 80%, which is the inner work. And I was like, I don't have anyone to show me that. And I was like, I've never done this 80% inner work in corporate because you don't have emotions in corporate. You don't ever like turn up to the office and cry or pretend that everything's not okay or talk about anything that might be holding you back in life, really. Like it was quite a facade in some ways. And so then, I literally like asked Christy like who was really good in this space of inner work, because I've never done any of it and I'm not naive enough to think that I don't have to do any of it. So who can you recommend? And then, you were one of the people that I spoke to and ticked all the boxes, and we jumped in, not long after.
Yeah, so good. I love that. And I'm so happy because you had that same realization as me, and maybe even slightly earlier on than I did, but because I remember back in 2016, my first stepping stone to being an entrepreneur was a network marketing business, and I remember the same thing, like coming in. And I think what's important to be aware of here as well is that there's a difference between mentoring and coaching, because it's like with, what Chrissy's doing with you, it's mentoring. It's literally showing you, okay, this is what I did to get from A to B. And then, but coaching is different because it's actually, it's asking the questions for people to find their own answers and work through, their own emotional, mental, unconscious blockages. Anyway, tangent. So next question. So what has shifted in your life in the last 7 months of doing this work?
Everything, if I can say that. Literally everything, because what I didn't, I'd done none of this inner work before, and so I didn't realize any of the layers of onion that we've unpeeled. So the first for me was going back and healing some trauma, from my childhood days and some limiting beliefs that I had. And just that alone, separate to business results, has been so freeing. And so, just living a completely different life. I literally feel, just more free these days. And so that definitely has been a big side of things. But I also know I wouldn't have been able to move as quick as I have in this business if I didn't work through not only that from my childhood, but also little blocks that come up along the way that we can just address and move on so that they don't hold me back.
Totally. Can you remember the analogy you shared with someone who was speaking to you about this work? Something around the bumps in the road or something when you work with a coach?
Yeah, so there's 2 that I like to use. The first is why would you drive a car and try and get to the end of your destination as fast as you can on a bumpy road? It's going to be painful. You're going to get to the end slower. It's going to be more traumatic. It's not going to be a smooth road. It's going to be rocky. Versus if you know that someone else can help you with a smoother path, it's going to be a lot more pleasant. You're going to get to the end quicker. So why would you not invest in that? And the other analogy that I like to use is without doing the inner work, it's almost like you're trying to drive a car really fast and you've got one foot on the accelerator and the other on the brake. And the brake is the inner stuff that comes up and will block you subconsciously. And the accelerator is our mind and what we're used to and how quick we want to get results and how impatient we can be and and all of those things. So it's like, do you want to drive the car with the, you know, the brake and the accelerator down a bumpy road, or do you want to drive, you know, just with the accelerator on the smooth road?
Exactly. Smooth
Yeah,
sailing.
that's
yeah,
it.
Totally. And it's yes, love that answer. So next I would love to know what has been your biggest breakthrough? Like if you could name one biggest breakthrough or biggest highlight in the last 7 months.
It's a hard one. So I'm going to share with you a breakthrough that I had that I wasn't even like aware of at the time, obviously. And what was happening in my business is that I was attracting people that were not in a financial position to start the way that I started in the business. And I kept wondering like why that was. But I also, there was something in me that actually didn't even feel worthy of bringing people in that had the money up front to just pay and not go down the finance path or anything. And I couldn't work out in my head why. Like I was thinking about this quite a few times. I think we'd had a couple of weeks between sessions, and then I came to see you and we started like looking a little bit deeper, because obviously we've got like what's in our head, but then under that can be like the emotion and, you know,
Under
your
the
whole
iceberg.
life under
95%.
the iceberg. 95%, right? So it's like your whole life, you know, before that moment, and everything subconsciously that's stored. And then what we did was we went through a process of looking, you know, as to why I was feeling that way and what it was. And it ended up coming back to something that, to be honest, I don't even think I would have remembered it coming into the session. It was only something I remembered coming out of the session, and it was back from my childhood when I used to live across the road from this girl. We did horse riding together. She had a lot more, her family had a lot more money than us. And I kind of, at that point, not knowingly attached like money to worthiness and didn't feel as worthy with her friendship because I didn't have the same things for my horse that she did. And it sounds so silly, but it's like...
But it's real.
It's totally real, right? And like this
Yeah.
was something that I didn't even really remember from my childhood. Like I only remembered when I really dug deep, and then it was going through and actually going, okay, well, the amount of money that you have or the things that you have does not associate in any way to worthiness, and does not associate in any way to like the people that you call into your life, be that, you know, business or personal. So
Yeah.
it was just a really big shift, and it's probably the one that like stood out the most for me, because like I couldn't have remembered those moments in my head if I even tried. Like there's a bit from my childhood that I don't remember. And so the fact that I
And
like...
yet it was a block in your business.
Yeah, and there's no way I would have seen it. It's like we're talking about the car analogy. It was like a blind spot that was like totally not in my vision at all. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I love that, because it's like this is how we have these blocks in business which can show up as like, oh, like I'm not feeling worthy in my leadership, or, you know, I'm not calling in the right people, or I'm doing a lot but not getting the results, or feeling frustrated, whatever it is. And because 95% of what's driving our behavior and everything in our lives is completely unconscious, that is literally why we need to work with a coach to be able to show us that. It's
What
like,
we can't see.
It's like, it's like, how am I supposed to figure out on my own that a bloody, you know, my friend, her horse, she had better horse accessories than me when I was 7 years old, is now like showing up as this in my business. Like, exactly. We'd just never get to that on our own.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I love, and I'm laughing, but I also love, you know, the beautiful innocence of when we are children and the illusions that we buy into, right? Because such a simple thing happened. And I actually had, I was speaking to another client a few days ago, and what was it? I think she had a fear of failure. So she was avoiding going all in because she didn't want to feel like a failure. And when we dropped into, because our body, so the mind forgets but the body remembers. Our body is literally a map of the unconscious. And when we dropped into the sensation in her body around that feeling, literally the memory came forth of her being like 5 or 6 years old at school, and her teacher called in her parents because she wasn't learning as fast as the other kids and she felt like a failure. And so her protection mechanism was to go, well, fuck, I never want to feel like a failure again. But then that was meaning it was that she was not going all in and taking action in her business because of that unconscious pattern playing out. So it's like it's crazy, this stuff,
so
right?
powerful.
And it's so powerful. And it's so funny too, because it's like I often joke, and I think I've shared this with you before, around like, it's like you think you're coming in because the reason you shared of why you hired me is because you wanted to be successful in business.
Yeah,
So
I
it's
wanted to get there as quick as I could.
Yeah.
And I knew, like, if I didn't go do 80% of the work, then it's probably going to be 80% slower. Like,
Yeah.
it was just a no-brainer.
Totally. And the reason, though, that you came into this is because you wanted to be successful, right? But this is the funny thing, is like we do these things because we want to be successful, and then along the way it's like, holy shit, we almost open up to the whole point of life, which is being free internally, I believe.
100%. Yeah.
Because
well,
when you start becoming aware of all this stuff, it's like, holy crap, this stuff has been a driving force in my life and driving me to behave or live my life in a way that's not actually in alignment with the way that I want to live. And what a priceless gift, even beyond like the money or the success in business, you know?
yeah, absolutely.
And breaking generational patterns for our kids and
All the things.
All the things.
Yeah.
So many, yeah. All of
Yeah,
things.
the absolute like beauty in all of this, as you said, is that you actually get to do life like so much better than otherwise, and put aside like the business and the success that comes from that, and just the life that you get to live. It's just the most empowering, like freeing gift.
Yeah, the success and the money or achievements or whatever almost become just like a cherry on top.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah. Awesome. So, next question. I would love to know, how has emotional mastery supported you in life and business?
In life and business.
And motherhood?
And motherhood. Yeah, I was just thinking about kids actually when you asked me that question. So let's go straight to that. So in terms of like emotional mastery, I think anyone who's a mum on, that's listening to this podcast now can relate to,
a
our
mum
little
in business.
Pardon?
A mum in business.
A mum in business.
That's a whole situation.
Yes, that's it. There's a lot going on in your life. You've got little kids and like they have got a lot of emotions and it can be tiring sometimes. So there's probably two parts to answering that question around being a mum, and that is that it's definitely helped me be a better mum, because the more regulated I am, the more in tune that I am with my emotions, the easier I'm able to regulate any emotion that comes up, the better mother that I can then be to my children, the better partner I can be, like just overall life. I'm going to show up as a better person. And then, when all of that stuff is going so well, the way that you then show up in your work is a million times better, because your life, separate to work is amazing. So it really does have like a benefit in everything in your life, like motherhood, relationships, business, friendships, everything.
Everything.
Yeah, it's just a whole lot better.
Yeah, I love that. Awesome. Because our kids literally regulate or co-regulate with our nervous system. So it's like, and I love this too, because I think a huge thing, and I know this was a big thing that held me back, was I had a fear of going all in on my business because I was afraid that it would take me away from being a present mum. Mm-hmm. But then I realized the truth was that when I'm just following what lights me up, and part of that is doing this work because this work lights me up so much, then I'm happy. But also just when it's not business or pursuing goals that stops us from being a present mum. It's actually our disassociation and our unresolved traumas that will stop us from being a present mum. And that was a huge realization I had, even like with my mum, was that when I was little, I bought into the illusion that my mum wasn't present with me because she was pursuing her career. But then when I looked back, the truth was she wasn't present because she was just very disconnected and she didn't know how to be with her emotions or heal the traumas that she had been through. So, yeah, so I love that. Thank you for sharing. Okay. So I would also love to know, how has this work been different to other personal development or other coaches?
Oh, this is a good one. So, very different to start off with. I did a lot of like personal development in the corporate days, like all the, rah-rah as they call it, a lot of mindset work. And don't get me wrong, I think all of that work, like Tony Robbins, Mel Robbins,
It has a place.
It
Yeah,
has a place, and it's very important. You do have to have a positive mindset, and but the thing that all of that doesn't address is the inner work that we've just been talking about. And you can, in your head, be trying to do something so much, but not achieve it or do it in a very painful way, versus if you actually work out what the block is behind it. And if you're not doing like the work in your head and the work in your heart or in your body together, then it's only going to be your head working, and there's going to be things like internally that are holding you back subconsciously. So it just comes back to getting those results quicker and also living, a more abundant, more free life in the process of it. And none of the work that I did in corporate ever touched on like any of the emotional stuff that was holding you back, anything, any limiting beliefs that you had. It was all just, if you keep thinking that you can do it, you'll do it. And if you keep trying harder or you keep hustling more, then you'll do it. It was all just talk, and there was nothing that was actually
Deeper.
deeper and getting what was in your body that was holding you back out. Because it's only, I believe, when you do that you then get to move forward at a quicker pace.
100%. Yeah, because the body is the densest layer, so if it's not shifted from the body, it hasn't shifted.
Boom, boom.
Boom, boom. Tweetable, quotable. I love that. So, okay. What is the number one piece of advice you would give to someone starting out as an entrepreneur?
The number one piece of advice that I would have...
And just to quickly pre-frame here too. So Mel has gone from, starting at 0 8 months ago,
Yeah.
to you just had an 11K month.
Yeah.
And you've been steadily growing until
On track
until
to
that
do
point.
to do the same, if not more, this month. So
Epic.
I've replaced the income that I used to have in corporate, and this is just the beginning.
Which is, boom, boom.
Exciting, boom, boom.
This is just the beginning. Yeah, and so I love that. And so what's the number one piece of advice that you would give to someone who's just starting out as an entrepreneur and they're wanting to, like, you are ready to fucking come in guns blazing and like really do it? What would have advice?
So my number one piece of advice would be to find your people, find the group of people that are going to show you and pull you into the life that you desire. So, one of those, obviously an inner work coach, another might be a person who has actually done what you want to do in business and is willing to coach you. And surround yourself with the people that have gone first and the people that are doing what you want to do, and then learn from them and show up as willing, coachable, and we already know you'll be hungry.
You got to be hungry.
That's it. Starving. I was starving.
Yes.
Never going back.
And I love working with women who are starving and who have had that line in the sand moment. I love that. So, final question that I have for you today. How do you stay committed to continuing your own personal development journey? So in other words, on days when you wake up, because we're all human, we have days we wake up and we go, I don't feel like doing fucking anything today. I don't want to talk to anyone. I don't want to see anyone. I don't want to adult today. It feels too hard.
Yeah.
What is the thing that makes you go, no, you know what? I'm still going to get up and I'm still going to go and do my rituals
Yeah.
and do the things that I know are good for me and that work. Yeah, what is that? What's the reason?
So for me, it's
Or the
just
drive.
it's connecting into my why. Like, why am I doing life different to anyone else in my family before? And to be honest, like up until the last 8 months, different to anyone I'd really ever known before. And that is my kids, my partner, the life that we have. And also I think now about the work that I'm doing now is actually going to be rewarding like my kids and their kids. So if I ever have days where I don't feel like doing the work, I do honor that, and I give myself some space. I make sure I'm nourished, my cup is full, and then after that I always make sure that I show up and do what I need to do because of them, and because I want to change that for like my generation, my family. But I also, a massive part of what I do is I want to help other people do it. And if I'm not getting up in the morning and actually doing that work, then how am I going to connect to people and actually help them change their lives and do what I'm doing now? Because in my opinion, like, no one should be living in a life that they don't love and that they feel stuck in, or that they're grinding in or burnt out in, because we've all got choices. So if I'm not showing up and doing the work, I'm not giving them that choice because they don't know that it exists. So that drives me a lot as well.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, and one of the many reasons why I appreciate you and why you're my client.
Thank you.
And why you're doing so well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have got 2 questions for you.
Okay. I'm scared. Should I be scared? No, I'm just kidding.
So you've been coached by and also coach a lot of very successful people. What would you say are the top 2 things that the highest achievers have in common?
Ooh. Yeah, so great question. And there's definitely a few things. Number 1, I would say that every single person who I've met, am now friends with, and mentored by, or coach that have really made it, let's say, as entrepreneurs, in the sense that, not just making like consistent 10K months or whatever, but like, a millionaires or multi-millionaires. The common thread is just what you ended your last question with, which just a hunger and a passion that burns so deep and so bright to be of service to others, to serve something greater than yourself. That is definitely a common thread of every successful person that I've ever met, 100%.
Yeah.
And it really comes back to that whole thing of, people don't care what you know, they just want to know that you care. And when people feel that your energy is genuine and that you genuinely give a shit about them and their desires, and you just deeply care, then that will get you so far. And I know, like, if I look back to 2017, which was when I first started growing a coaching business, I look back, like, I was 27 years old. At the time, I was still working as a waitress, and I was just showing up on live feeds, and we literally, because back then our businesses were joint, me and my husband had a joint coaching business, and very quickly, like, we grew to a multiple 6-figure coaching business, which is in the top, only 6% of coaches do that. And if I look back, it's almost not even really logical, because all we were doing was, we weren't running ads. I didn't do Instagram. All I did was show up when I was inspired, like every day on Facebook, because I was like, I'm so fucking lit up and inspired by everything I'm learning. It's changing my life. So, like, who can I share this with? People need to hear this.
Your joy was contagious.
The joy, joy, the passion, it was contagious. And so we'd just do live feeds, and things grew very quickly without even us having this money goal or anything. So I think that energy alone, that genuine hunger and desire to help people, will get you so far for anyone listening to this. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. And second question now, what is your your number one lesson that you have learned in your personal inner work journey that you feel comfortable sharing? All the juicy questions.
Juicy. This is juicy. Well, there's been a lot of lessons over the last 8 years, but something I've more recently integrated is that I think for a long time, I felt like I needed to be perfect, or I could only show up when I was in the high vibe. And I would feel a lot of shame around when I was going through stuff. And it's only been more recently that I realized that, we're all human. And every single successful person that I've ever met, like they still have self-doubt. They'll do something and wonder, fuck, was that good? Did I piss someone off? Like, it doesn't matter who you are, what you've achieved, or everyone is human. And a huge key piece for me in being able to show up, and like even, last month having my biggest month, 56K, which happened very effortlessly, was just embracing every part of me and just going, yeah, I love my humanness. I don't need to be perfect. I just get to show up in whatever way I feel inspired to and have this desire to help people. And that is enough. And I am enough as I am right now to live my dreams and create my dreams. I don't need to wait until I'm prettier, skinnier, smarter, more read, more knowledgeable, more, it's just, we can have it now when we embrace that we are good enough now just as we are right now in this moment. And that's been a huge thing for me. Huge breakthrough.
I love it. Yeah. So raw and so, genuine. And you're right, we are. Like, we're all human. We have the good, the bad, the low days, the high days. It's just part of life. So
yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I've seen a lot of posts on Instagram of like people going, oh, I'm super successful, and I'm crying today, like, just to be really real with you guys. And it's almost like I kind of want to disrupt even that concept or that culture, because it's like, of course you fucking cry. Like, because you start making 100K months or you make $1 million, you don't suddenly stop, having emotional meltdowns or self-doubt, or it's like, of course, like, let's normalize. And I heard a really great quote a few years ago, and it was a guy, Ben Kelly. He was responding to a comment of people saying like, well, if you don't show up, crying or like in your shit, then you're not being genuine, or you're not being authentic about your journey as like a successful entrepreneur. And it was really great because he showed up and all he said was, look, we don't need to show up as like crying or like in our shit, because the way that that we have shit or that we cry sometimes is because we're human.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, that's it.
Yeah, it's not like show up online once a week and make sure you're crying so that you can be more relatable.
Exactly. It's just like, no, of course. That's, And and I mean, and it's so interesting because, my best friend, Christy, she's a multi-millionaire, and a few weeks ago I was speaking at a retreat, and one of the ladies was like, oh, I was really surprised to hear, like, when Christy shared that, she's been going through a lot, and especially as a mum, and it's like, of course, like she owns 2 7-figure businesses. She's a mum of 3 under 6. Of course she has fucking emotional meltdowns. Like, who wouldn't?
Yeah.
Like, that is a lot to carry. And I think that's also why, as an entrepreneur and a mum in business, it is an absolute necessity for us to know how to masterfully navigate our emotions, because emotions are a part of everyday life. And, studies have shown that the highest performing, athletes, the incredibly high achieving and performing individuals in the world have really amazing emotional intelligence. And honestly, that's a huge thing that I see. You didn't ask me this, but I'm just sharing on a tangent.
Keep going. I'm loving it.
It's a huge thing that I see hold people back, is that in school we weren't taught how to be with our emotions, like literally. And when you think about that, it's kind of crazy, because emotions are part of our day-to-day experience. And so, but we were not taught anything about them at all. And so, that was another breakthrough in my journey was learning how to fucking feel my emotions.
Yeah, totally. Totally relate to that as well. Yeah.
And this is why, like, I get all of my clients, including you, to do Koya at least twice a week, is because it's a form of somatic therapy, and it opens up the body to release all of these emotions that we've been carrying for weeks, months, or even years. And when we have emotions are just energy, and when we have stagnant energy, that creates stagnancy in our life. And people are wondering why, like, I just feel so stagnant, or I've hit a plateau and I can't bust through it. Often it's all the fucking so much emotion that is just stored that people aren't aware of.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you want to share a little bit about so, like, when you first remember when we first
there
had
were two
the,
things. I was going to
sales
mention
call?
the first session that we had together, but also you were talking about school, and then that flows into work. So for the 20 years in corporate, there were no like feelings around at work. So it really is this thing of like society doesn't really doesn't show you that showing your emotions is safe to do and okay. And then, that goes into later on in life. And I remember that we moved here 2 years ago, and a girlfriend that I met literally the day that we moved here, up until recently, used to laugh with me about the F word. And I was like, what's the F word? And she's like, feelings, and you showing feelings. And she's like, now you show all the feelings. This is great. So it's definitely very like a really interesting process to go through, just in terms of life in general. And I do remember our first session, I was very like in my head, and I think I was treating it a bit like a sales call. And I think you said, where are you feeling that, Melissa? And I said, in my head. Like, where else would I be feeling it?
I was like, where are you feeling that thought? And you're like, well, what do you mean, where am I feeling it? It's in my head, it's a thought.
What sort of question is, who is this woman?
And now you're amazing at feeling your feelings.
Yes.
Right? So good. Cool. All right. Well, I think, is there anything else that you would like to share around anything, your journey, being an entrepreneur, being a mum?
Well, look, I think we've covered pretty much all of it. But to wrap it up is just that when you stop fighting, or stop thinking I don't need to do the inner work, because I did think that for a little bit at the start. I was like, okay, on one side I had someone very successful telling me that 80% of this business is inner work, but then I also had my head telling me, well, I've got so far without doing that. Like, why do I need someone to talk to me about my emotions and the inner work? But then I also just had to step back from my ego and go, okay, well, if someone very successful is telling you this and you've never actually delved into any of the inner work, personal or business, then maybe there's something there to look into.
If a multi-millionaire is telling me this, I think maybe there's something to
Yeah, and it's like part of the agreement of becoming an entrepreneur is that you're coachable, willing, and hungry. So
That's right.
You can't have this attitude of I know it all. You need to be coachable. So success leaves clues.
Totally. And I love you shared that piece around ego, because I think there can be a misconception around, it's weak to ask for help. And it's like, well, here's the thing.
And
right?
weak to show your emotions.
Totally, which is bullshit conditioning from society, right? It's because actually I've faced some of my deepest, darkest shit, and like that required every last bit of my strength that I had.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier to disassociate and like numb out and not feel them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that piece around the ego because, you know, there's a difference between coaching and therapy. And it's like people might think that, well, reaching out and starting to work with a coach, well, it's weak to ask for support. But actually, you know, if you look at, well, who works with coaches? People who are at the top of their fucking game are working with coaches like CEOs, professional athletes. They all have coaches. And it's because they don't want to let anything that they cannot see hold them back. So yeah, I love that you share that because the ego can be a huge thing in holding us back. And even myself, you know, one of my core values is personal growth. But I remember in 2021, I had hit a major plateau and I wasn't working with any coach or healer at the time because I felt really hurt and let down by a previous mentor. And I went and sat in an ayahuasca ceremony, and after that I had anxiety for like probably the first time ever. And so it forced me to ask for the support of a healer who is now like a close friend of mine. Shout out to Ange if you're watching or listening. But I remember at the time, you know, I started and I was paying her, you know, $250 a session, and she was a healer, and my ego, and it's crazy, like the stuff that our ego tells us, right? Because my ego is like, oh, you know, I only work with 7-figure mentors and coaches and blah, 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 because I had up until that point. And I'm like, well, cool. That's gotten me to a certain point, and now I'm super fucking stagnant and plateaued and don't really know what I'm doing with my life right now. So, yeah, that almost stopped me from making a decision that, you know, I went on to work with her for 18 months, and then that led to my next thing, and it was totally life-changing. So
Yeah.
I think the ego can be a huge thing that takes us out of the game, and it takes a lot of courage and self-awareness to notice it and not let ourselves buy into the stories that the ego is telling us. Yeah, and just be humble and willing to be open.
It's like on the other side of ego and getting used to doing the things that are uncomfortable is where the results lie, and the real, ultimately like inner freedom is.
Totally.
Because you get to let go of it all.
Totally. And one more thing just dropped into one of your other questions you asked me. The fear is, you asked me around like what's a common thread in successful entrepreneurs. And I think that people who are successful versus people who don't make it, the successful people will lean into the fear and discomfort rather than run away from it.
Yeah, do it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, and I know for myself and definitely other successful people I know, I think it's also like, what do you fear more? Getting out of your comfort zone, taking risks where you might fuck up and fail. Like, that's just inevitable. I think, of course, you're going to make mistakes. But what do you fear more? Like, taking those risks, maybe failing, or I know for me, my greatest fear would be getting to the end of my life and looking back with regret.
Yeah.
Like, getting to the end of my life and going, I didn't become the person I was meant to become. I didn't live the life that I was born to live. There is no fear for me that's greater than that. It was like, yeah.
100%. It's like you've got to use that fear as your reason why to do it. Like, I just today did a post on exactly this. It was like, I don't have the money. Well, do you want to not have the money until you're like 60 or 70 or ever have it, and then pass that on to your children? Or I don't have the time. Well, like, you've got to feel that fear and go, well, what do I need to do to get on the other side so that I actually have that freedom? And you can't do that unless you go through it.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all of those, I don't have time or I don't have money. They're never the real reason.
No, they're just, yeah,
It's
they're
always
the
something
surface.
deeper.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
usually-
another one was around, like not believing that you can do it. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, do you want to get to the, like you were saying, do you want to be on your deathbed and be like, I never really gave my life a go. Like I never was truly in on it.
Yeah.
Because, fear is what's going to stop that from you being on the other side of it.
Totally. I'd rather speak on stage in front of 1,000 people than have that happen.
Yeah, and fail or be like fall over on stage or any of those things than like have
100% fart on
not
stage.
done it fart on stage.
In front of 1,000 people.
That's a great quote. I would rather fart on stage in front of 1,000 people than have not done it.
100%. Well, that's a great way to wrap this up.
I think so.
So,
And on that note,
on that note, thank you, Mel, for joining me.
thank you for
You're
having me.
amazing. So excited for our next 6 months together.
Me too.
We're going to go 30K plus and beyond, and all the other amazing things that are going to come with that. So, yeah.
So exciting.
Thank you.
Thank you.